The NHL Draft usually brings lots of trade activity involving many players and picks. Today we're going to discuss which NHL teams I feel are going to be the most active and the most likely to do the most significant trades at this year's 2021 NHL Draft. And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the teams that I expect to be the most active and see the most trade activity out of when it comes to the 2021 NHL Draft over the little bit of time leading into the draft. Of course, it's coming up next month on July 23rd and 24th. So on the 23rd will be the evening of the first round, and then the 24th will be the remaining rounds after that. Now, some years at the draft we get very little activity, and some years there's a lot, and some years are kind of in between. I do expect this year's, not only the draft, but the entire offseason to be one of the busiest off seasons we've seen in recent memory, maybe even the busiest. It has the potential, given the fact that we have a new NHL franchise coming in at Seattle. So clearly, getting ready for an expansion draft, and all those implications will impact things. Plus, we also have a situation where we have a condensed, shortened offseason because of the schedule changes due to the COVID shutdown and how it's wreaked havoc on the NHL calendar. So obviously the Stanley Cup won't be awarded until somewhere around early to mid-July, and then we're going to go right into not long after we're going to have free agency, expansion draft, free agency. Free agency is only getting started right before August. Normally by August everything is completely calmed down, so we're going to be dealing with a lot of news probably right up until late August, would be my guess. And then September, things might calm down a little bit as teams are starting to prepare for training camps, and then we'll obviously have the new season start in early October. So today, like I said, we're looking at a lot of teams that we're expecting to be very, very active. There's a lot of different reasons why teams need or want to make trades, and we're going to look at which teams are going to be the busiest when it comes to the draft or the little bit of time leading into it. So now these are not necessarily in order either, by the way. These are just teams that I feel will be the busiest, and I'll explain why I feel this way about each team. Now, first up, we've got the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets are a team that already hold 3 first-round selections. They're a team that is certainly in a bit of a crossroads. They either need to go down through a rebuild, or they can use their currency and maybe acquire some higher-end players and see if they can do more of a reset. I personally think we're going to see more of a retool. They hired a very young, inexperienced coach, and they've certainly got, like I said, 3 first-rounders already. It's rumored to be that they might be looking for even more. Now, of course, they're also rumored to be in on the Jack Eichel trading sweepstakes with the Sabres. So clearly, that's not the signal you send when you're looking to rebuild and acquiring Jack Eichel. He's going from a rebuilding Sabres team. If he goes to a rebuilding Jackets team, I'm not sure how happy he's going to be, but he's not going to have a lot of say in it because he doesn't have any trade protection in his contract. So regardless, if they pull off an Eichel trade, there's always the Seth Jones situation in Columbus that we're looking for. Final year of his contract has made it known he's not going to sign an extension, so that's certainly an issue for Columbus. So between Eichel and Jones and the 3 first-round picks, they have a lot of balls in the air, and I expect them to be very active and very busy leading into and on the days of the NHL Draft. Now, next up, speaking of Jack Eichel, we've got the Buffalo Sabres. Now, we don't know when an Eichel trade is going to go down, but it's not the only significant move that the Sabres are expected to make this offseason, and many of the deals that they're going to be doing are likely going to involve several different draft currency pieces, so different picks either this year or in other drafts in future years. So it's not just Eichel. We've got Sam Reinhart. We've got Rasmus Ristolainen as well. So those 3 players that have all been pretty important pieces for them are possible to all be traded. I mean, Ristolainen is 1 year away from needing a new contract. Jack Eichel has made it known pretty well that he wants out of there. And Reinhart's an RFA, and based on his wording, it sounds like he wants out of there as well. So certainly the Sabres are picking first overall, and it's believed that a lot of their conversations around these players have centered around some of the higher first-round picks in this 2021 NHL Draft, and some feel that it might be possible that they leave that draft with multiple 2, 3, possibly high first-round picks in the top 10 or even top 15, depending on where those players end up. Like Sam Reinhart's been linked to a team like Columbus. He's been linked to a team like Vancouver, and depending on where they're picking, which are, high enough, they might be able to make that kind of deal. So then you get the Eichel situation, which could come to terms sooner. Maybe it drags on to the draft. I'm not really sure that that deal gets beyond the draft. So if it's not something that's taken place before we get there, then I would think there's a really good chance it'll happen over that 2-day span. But regardless, the Sabres have 3 significant players on the block, likely all get moved, likely all involve future-based packages coming back, so it only makes sense that they're a very, very active team around this NHL draft. Now, next up, we've got the Arizona Coyotes. Now, the Coyotes are a team to watch for a completely different reason. They're a team that's really, really low on draft currency. They hardly have any draft picks. Of course, they've been stripped of some of their higher picks due to that issue that they had where they were caught testing underage junior draft-eligible players where they were not allowed to do. So they've had to forfeit some picks. They've traded some other picks away. They're really low, and they're in a situation where the team is kind of at that spot where you almost think a rebuild's coming as well. They get a fairly new GM. There's talk that they're trading their captain, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. There's been talk about maybe moving Connor Garland. And you've also got a guy like Phil Kessel, who's rumored to be on the move again for the final year of his contract. So, they're going to be hiring a new coach as well. So there's a lot going on in Arizona, and where they have so few picks for the future, it's believed that all these players that they would be considered trading would all want future-based packages coming back. In the case of Ekman-Larsson, they'll likely take a contract back that's a little bit more sizable, but less term and money than his. If they can find somebody who's willing to move a deal that they don't like, that's say 3 or 4 years at maybe $5-6 million, something along those lines, that would be a more likely scenario than what they have. It would work better for them, save them some money, etc., get them out of the deal sooner. But where they have hardly any picks, they're going to be looking to get some and move some players off the roster, and it only makes sense that we see a lot of activity out of this team. We've got the Detroit Red Wings. Now, the Red Wings are going to be active for a variety of reasons. They have a fair bit of picks already, but they also have tons of cap space. They're one of the few NHL teams, there's only a handful of these guys around the league that have some space that they can actually use to their advantage. Now, we've already seen some moves like this at the deadline at the end of this current season here, where teams were taking on unfavorable contracts or retaining salary as a third party, basically weaponizing their cap space for additional picks or additional compensation of some sort. So Detroit can continue to do that. They don't have a situation where they have a ton of money that's going to be committed to a lot of players. They don't have a lot of up-and-coming RFAs that need big deals or anything like that. They do have some players to sign, but nobody that's really going to be cashing in on a big-time basis like we're going to see with other teams. So we know that Yzerman is already, known to be active at these situations and taking advantage of other teams. The Red Wings have 9 picks in the first 4 rounds of the draft, including 2 first-rounders. Then they have multiple second, third, and fourth rounders for 9 picks. So that's a lot. So they may not keep all of those. They may be able to acquire a decent roster player and use some of those picks as trade currency. So that's a possibility. They do need some prospects themselves, though. They have starting to build up a decent prospect pool, but they have a ways to go to really make it deep enough so that they can continue to develop off of that and get this team in a stronger direction in the next few years. So I don't think they'll trade too many picks, but I can see where they might put some of them to use to acquire a player that can help them right away as well. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils. They're in a similar situation as Detroit. They don't have quite as many picks, but they do have 2 first-rounders, including the one from the New York Islanders that they acquired in the Kyle Palmieri trade. And, of course, they have lots of cap space like Detroit. They have some good young talent that's not making a ton of money yet, and they don't have to worry too much yet about paying them the big raises for a little while. So they have some short-term cap flexibility where they can continue to weaponize that cap space to get additional younger players or prospects to their advantage here to do that. So it only makes sense. I wouldn't be completely shocked if they considered trading PK Subban, because I don't feel where they're at with their franchise right now. It makes sense to have a $9 million defenseman, and he's only down to 1 year. And if you retain some salary on that, you could likely move him along. Now, there's no guarantee they do that. A couple of reasons. They don't need to, because they don't need to space that badly. And obviously, I know they do value him for what he brings off the ice as well. From what I've heard, different interviews, I think he's starting to play a bigger role in their community, and off the ice, I think he's very well respected there compared to where he's been with other organizations. So not shocked if he stays, but it could be a situation where that contract makes sense to trade. Next up, we should see the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, I say you should see because we thought this last year and it never happened. Nikita Kucherov magically ended up on long-term injury reserve, and I'm not saying he wasn't hurt. I'm not saying there's a controversy there. Clearly, we've seen enough and heard enough to say that the NHL investigated things and it's by the book. It's not the Lightning's fault that the rules are the way they are. However, it would not be completely shocking if we see guys like Stamkos or Hedman on LTIR next year. I won't be shocked if it happens. I have no reason right now or proof to say that it's going to, but I can say that Stamkos and Hedman are both battling injuries and during this Stanley Cup playoff run. Now, as I record this video, they're still in the playoffs. This video won't be going up on YouTube for another 24 hours, so they still have to play Game 7 against the Islanders. I don't know how that's going to go yet because it hasn't happened, but by the time this video makes it to YouTube, that will be over with, and we'll know if they're either going home or advancing to the final to play against the Montreal Canadiens. But regardless, those two players are big, important pieces for them. They make a ton of money, and we know that they're battling something that's reasonably significant, and we saw Kucherov leave Game 6 injured as well. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be anything super long-term that he's going to be out for months and months and months again, but still, it wouldn't be shocking if they figure out a way, but I don't know if they can really get away without shedding something. So they do need to find some space. It makes sense that they move a player or two around the draft. Of course, they're going to lose somebody in expansion as well, and then from there, maybe they bring back an extra pick or something to that degree. But I do think the Lightning have to do something. I mean, makes sense, right? Next up, we have the Los Angeles Kings. The Kings are a team that are loaded with prospects and picks and have the ability to make some significant trades at this draft. Now, I don't see the Kings being a team that tries to move up or that really tries to do anything when it comes to the picks themselves. If the Kings are going to be busy at this draft, and I think there's a good chance they will be, it's going to be using their picks and their prospects to acquire some talent that can help them today. It's been well known that they're on a mission to acquire 2 top 6 forwards. They may or may not include one of them being a center. They've been in and out of the Jack Eichel conversations. I don't know if they're going to pull that off or not. They could pull it off, in my opinion, if they really want to. I'm not 100% convinced that they're that gung-ho about it, but they're certainly interested, and I think they will be more involved in the conversations before it's all said and done. But if it's not Eichel, I can see them going for other players, like a Sam Reinhart in Buffalo or many others. But they want 2 top 6 forwards. They have the currency to do it. It only makes sense that with the offseason really starting to heat up leading into the draft, there's a good opportunity that that's where it happens. Next up, we have the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche are a team with another year of playoff disappointment, just like a lot of other teams around the league. But this team is built to win, and it's built to win right now. And I think they've seen enough here in these playoffs to know that they need to make a few adjustments. I think they're a really, really good team, but they do have some key players that are on expiring contracts that are pending UFAs, including Captain Gabriel Landeskog, Philip Grubauer, who they acquired at the draft a few years back, as well as Brandon Saad. And they have a mega contract they have to put together for RFA Cale Makar. So this team is tight on space, but it also has a need to go into win-now mode, or to stay in win-now mode, I should say, but to make some adjustments. I think they need to change their blue line, and I think we're going to see them possibly be a player for Seth Jones. It's believed that Jones wants to go to Colorado. We'll see if that turns out to be true or not. But regardless of that, they need a rugged defenseman back there who can defend, move the puck. And Jones is a combination of all that and would make a lot of sense for them. They may have to part with a guy like Samuel Girard. I think Girard's the most likely to go. He's a young, dynamic defenseman, but he struggles on his own end because of his size. Great skater. Brings a lot, and he's got a longer-term contract that's not too bad. And a lot of teams that need a defenseman like him, like maybe he would be a really good fit in Columbus. He would add a different dynamic back there. So we'll see what happens, but I can see the Avalanche making a big move. It's likely going to be for a defenseman. I think Jones could be their guy, but we'll have to wait and see. And then, of course, could be other deals as well, because they may have to try to find a little bit of space to get everybody signed when it comes to Grubauer, Landeskog, and of course Makar, who's probably the most important of all those guys. Next up, we have the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks are another team expected to make significant moves. We know, again, they're in on the Eichel conversations. Bob Murray is expected to try to move some veteran guys, including players like Rickard Rakell, Adam Henrique, Jacob Silverberg, Josh Manson, all those guys possibly. And I'm not going to say they're all going to go because that would be difficult, but it's quite likely that they're all in conversations and at least one or two of those players could be moved. So it's also possible that they're willing to move some of their younger assets like a Troy Terry, like a Sam Steele, possibly a Max Jones or an Isaac Lenderstrom. Like, they may not be able to keep all these players, and it's going to be tough when it comes to expansion draft as well as what they feel this team needs moving forward. So Bob Murray is expected to do something significant this offseason. If it's not Eichel, it could be something else. And all of these guys could be in play. So I don't know if the Ducks are going to be making a ton of moves, but I do expect at least one of significance from this team based on everything we've heard in the last few months. Next up, we get the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, the Penguins are a team I expect to be busy. We have Ron Hextall and Brian Burke came into this franchise as the president and GM after Jim Rutherford abruptly resigned earlier this year. They did make a few moves, like including the Jeff Carter trade, which turned out to be really good for them. But they also discovered again in these playoffs that they can't really be a cup contender as is. The regular season and the playoffs are not the same beast, and even though they won the division, they still had another early exit. And if they want to have more playoff success with Sid and Gino in the lineup and Crystal Tang, they need to make some additional upgrades. And the first one is going to be between the pipes. Tristan Jarry struggled as a starter. Either Jerry is traded or they bring in another goalie to work with him in a 1A, 1B situation, and something else would be moved instead, which will likely have to be Casey DeSmith and possibly some other pieces. I'm not sure exactly what that would be. I know Marcus Pettersson is a player they'd be interested in trading. Last offseason, they were really close to bringing back Marc-Andre Fleury, and after everything that just went down at Vegas and how they lost to Montreal, Fleury's down to 1 year in his contract. I just talked about this in a video yesterday, saying how Vegas is expected to likely make some other moves to address other situations, and that contract of Fleury's might have to go. As much as the fans love him, and as much as the owner, I know Bill Foley, loves Fleury, they may not have a choice, and he could find himself, maybe, if it's not Pittsburgh, it could be somewhere else. So, not saying for sure that it happens, but I expect the Penguins to make some adjustments this offseason, especially between the pipes, and it very well could happen at the draft. It would make a lot of sense. It would be a great time for a deal to go down. Next up, we're looking at the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, the Flyers, again, like Colorado, want a top right-shot defenseman. They don't come easy. They're likely going to be in on a few players, including the same one that the Avs are looking at, which would be Seth Jones. Maybe Dougie Hamilton, but many believe that he's not the right type of defenseman that they want for that spot. So it's hard to say who they go after. But we do know this. We know a guy like Nolan Patrick, the former number 2 overall pick, is likely looking for a new change of scenery, wants out of there, get a fresh start. So he could be part of a package that helps them acquire a defenseman. Maybe their first round picks involved. And there's also a lot of talk about a guy like Jake Voracek too. They need some cap space. Either Voracek or JVR, one of those two guys who are both making a lot of money, if they're able to, could possibly be moved or exposed to Seattle, or maybe Seattle's enticed to take one of them on. Hard to say if they will do that because it's bigger contracts, but I think the Flyers will indeed try at least, and it wouldn't be shocking if they do make a trade for a defenseman. And I said their first round pick this year likely would have to be involved and likely could happen at this year's draft. Next up, we have the Calgary Flames. Now, the Flames have two fairly significant names in Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan, who both have a ton of trade rumors around them. They do have a decently high first-round pick this year after not making the playoffs, and the Flames are expected to make big changes. Could their first-round pick be in play? It very well could be. It really boils down to what they're going to do here, but it's believed that a significant trade is coming. Now, the Flames have been linked to the Eichel conversations as well, but you don't really hear of them as much, so I'm not sure that that's really a big likelihood that we're going to see. We've heard some Matthew Tkachuk talk, which I don't think is anything to it, but still, they're a team that is, as much as yesterday I heard Darren Dreger reporting that there's a lot of chatter around that the Flames are going to be very busy. A lot of conversations are being had, and Monahan being the name that comes up the most frequently. So we'll see what the Calgary Flames do end up doing, but when you have big names like that are likely to get moved, the draft is an opportune time and sometimes a place you see a lot of these deals take place. And then lastly, the New York Rangers are another team. And the reason I say the Rangers are going to be expected here is, for one, another team linked to Eichel. I mean, Eichel's the big fish here, and once that trade takes place, it's probably going to open the floodgates to a lot of these other moves. I mean, but at the same time, the Rangers do have other things they can do. After the way things were handled in that Washington Capitals game where Tom Wilson basically manhandled the whole team, and then after we saw the owner, Dolan, fire Gorton and Davidson, and went through a whole bunch of changes, and really they were unhappy with the identity of this team and the ability to defend themselves, the toughness level, the grit level. So they're definitely going to be making a trade. Regardless of what they do for Eichel, they're going to be looking to bring in some type of guy who could be like kind of like an enforcer, but someone who can play and be physical and be there to kind of lay down the law. And even though I can't say there's any likelihood it could happen, just my own personal thought, I kind of wonder, would they talk to Vegas about Ryan Reeves? We've seen Ryan Reeves be a healthy scratch for the last few games of that series against Montreal. He wasn't playing as much. His role seemed to diminish. He's down to 1 year in his contract, and we know the smack talk that he's had with Tom Wilson in the past. Like, he would be the ideal guy for the Rangers to respond to having Wilson in their division and to deal with him so much. Like I said, I can't say a deal would go down. I can't say that Vegas would trade Reeves. That's just a thought. But the fact that we saw his role diminish and be a healthy scratch, when those things happen, sometimes you wonder if a trade could possibly come to be. So if the Rangers are going to have multiple things going on, multiple conversations, and I do think that we're going to see something significant out of the Rangers this offseason, and it could even be multiple deals. So therefore, I think at the draft, we're going to see and hear a lot of chatter around that team as well. So there's lots of other teams we didn't talk about here today. Not to say that they won't make a trade or that they won't be busy as well. I just feel these teams are the most likely to be the busiest. So let me know what your thoughts are. What deals do you see going down at the draft? What teams do you feel will be the busiest? Let me know in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.